We stand, we rise, we get up from our seats and onto our feet no less than 6 times tonight, this Kol Nidrei night. We stand in reverence before the ark when opened, and we stand at times when the Torahs remain cradled behind the ark's closed doors. Be it the Baruch Hu, the Amidah, in a few moments the Aleinu, the Mourner's Kaddish, and tonight, of course, Kol Nidrei. We stand. Why? We stand out of respect, to be sure, but the sages taught that we also stand for the purposes of intention, to deepen our focus on prayer and reawaken our collective commitment, a commitment to reflection, to discovery, to the wonders of our faith and life itself. And some of you might be thinking right about now about standing at this very moment, standing and walking right out of the sanctuary because the cantor is doing something besides hitting the high notes. Well, bear with me as I pinch sermonize for our rabbi leader and deliver instead some high notes. Gotta have a little Jewish humor even on Kol Nidrei night. Tonight I stand in for him and stand before you to talk about why we stand and what as a congregation we stand for. Words matter. For many of us, that's a statement that rings more true today than ever before. Words matter indeed. Their meaning, context, impact, and weight, all central to the litany of communal confessions we uttered just minutes ago. During the Al-Chet, the confession, we pounded our chest as symbolic punishment to cement the memory of our own pain and that which we've imposed on others. Pain borne in part by lies, insults, gossip, words that may have humiliated, offended, or embarrassed. Yom Kippur reminds us of the power of our deeds. No doubt about that. But as important, Yom Kippur shines a laser light on the power of our words. Which brings me to Kol Nidrei, that haunting, strange, solemn Aramaic text for which, as a congregation, we stand. The words Kol Nidrei ve'esarei translate to these vows and promises. They date back as far as the 3rd century of the Common Era. Do the math. The Jews of Babylonia, today's Iraq, inscribed these very words on clay bowls, magic bowls, which they then buried under their homes and in cemeteries to disrupt evil curses. Our ancestors were a superstitious lot. They believed in the presence of demons and wicked beings and confronted their anxieties and fears with the words Kol Nidrei ve'esarei, which were to be read as magic spells and incantations that in their world provided a measure of control over the precarious nature of their lives. Fast forward 600 years, and a more extensive and less mystical version of the text appears in a High Holiday Machzor, a High Holiday prayer for the first time. No longer a basis for magic spells, Kol Nidrei was transformed by the rabbis into a legal proclamation, one which sought to annul the vows and promises made during the previous year, and in some versions also into the coming year, as our version we sang tonight does. The purpose to pardon prior sins and to provide the opportunity to go forward into the new year absolved of guilt and shame. The legal metaphor continues to this day. In traditional synagogues, Kol Nidrei is sung 3 times, emblematic of the 3 witnesses traditionally required for legal matters. And it is done so in the presence of 3 Torahs, each a witness in the heavenly tribunal, where God is our judge. And to put an even finer point on the symbolism, the Kol Nidrei ceremony is intended to transform our holy sanctuary into a court of law, a court of judgment. And it is in this court that we stand tonight on Kol Nidrei night. We stand to confess, to atone, and to promise. We stand to deepen our self-awareness, to come closer to our best selves. We stand to grow and encourage compassion, humility, and love. And we stand together as a community with a hope and prayer in our hearts and on our lips that we all be sealed in the book of life. As your cantor, I would be horribly remiss not to mention what has stood the test of time, and that's the melody. The ethereal, deeply moving German Ashkenazic melody, familiar to all of us, that is Kol Nidrei, was fixed in its heart-stirring tonality since about the 16th century, about 500 years ago. And there are many stories that attest to the emotional power of this age-old melody, really a collection of many short melodies. The composer Arnold Schoenberg, one of the great musical geniuses of the 20th century, was raised in an ambivalent Jewish home in Austria, and when he fell in love, the only condition to the marriage was baptism. When asked at the time, "What are you?" he said, "I'm an atheist, unbelieving and free-thinking, as my father was." And Schoenberg converted. But years later, divorced and alone, he attended synagogue with friends who brought him to hear the music of Kol Nidrei. He was so moved by the experience that he decided to return to Jewish life. And going forward, he composed no fewer than 6 monumental musical pieces on Jewish themes. In fact, he wrote a massive oratorio titled Kol Nidrei. Perhaps the most beautiful description of the power of music is in just a couple of sentences written by the naturalist and philosopher Henry David Thoreau. I memorized it in 10th grade because it was a needle point on the wall of my high school choir. I think that's the only thing I memorized in high school. If I could only put into words that music which I hear, music that can bring tears to the eyes of marble statues, to which our very muscles are obedient. And while the music, the melody, has remained a constant, the words of Kol Nidrei, which to be precise is not a prayer at all, for nowhere does the text address or acknowledge God, were a matter of ongoing controversy for centuries. It was changed, altered, edited countless times. In the 19th century in Germany, Kol Nidrei was actually removed from the Machzor altogether. Why? Because the anti-Semites were using it as a polemic against the Jews, with non-Jews manipulating its words to suggest that Jews couldn't be trusted. Look, they said, the Jews on the holiest night of the year, they say that all their promises are null and void. The last year and the year coming. And so the rabbis in those communities removed it from the Machzor. And for a time, this spelled doom for what we now know to be one of the most dramatic and moving and theatrical moments in the entire Jewish year. But many of the German Jews protested, which led the rabbis to agree upon a temporary compromise. In some communities, they replaced it with a setting of Psalm 130, which prays to God, out of the depths I have called to you, God. God, hear my voice, Shema Kolenu. Let your ears be attentive to the voice of my supplications. But it was not sung in Aramaic or Hebrew. It was sung in German. And this is what it sounded like in the Iranian Burgstrasse synagogue, which was destroyed on Kristallnacht. But keep this in mind. It was twice the size of the sanctuary we're sitting in tonight. 3,300 seats. Here's what it sounded like. Aus den Tiefen ruf ich dich, o ewiger Herr, erhöre meine Stimme. In most communities, this practice proved unsustainable, but not everywhere. In 1986, I received a call from a colleague who had recently been appointed the senior cantor of Baltimore Hebrew congregation. She was stunned to learn that she would be expected to sing a version of Kol Nidrei in German, as well as a German language setting of the Kedusha, known as the Deutsche Kedusha. Being a supportive colleague, I wished her viel Glück, best of luck. However, this was the exception, and Kol Nidrei, as we know it, accompanied by that familiar, mesmerizing melody, assumed its rightful place back in the High Holiday Liturgy. And so we ask again, what do we stand for? We know now what we literally stand for on Yom Kippur, yet we're living in a time where knowing what we must stand for is crucial. As Jews, we are asked, commanded even, to make a difference in our world, to contribute, to repair, to make it better. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel said this: just to be is a blessing. Just to live is holy. And yet, being alive is no answer to the problems of living. To be or not to be is not the question. The vital question is how to be and how not to be. Can I ask everyone to rise for a moment? And hold each other. May we all become the better people we aspire to be. We say these words, Gamar Chatima Tova, and may we all be sealed in the book of life, and that we stand for what our tradition teaches us is right and just and mandatory of us. Shana Tova.